Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I? Okay, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member. Just briefly, being from West Virginia during this COVID experience, I've heard anecdotally from a guy in Clendenin who lost his landline for 27 days. He has no availability for connectivity, so the landline really is his only emergency. I've heard from a gentleman whose daughter, he's in Waverly, she has to drive 10 to 15 miles to get the connectivity to continue her education at West Virginia University remotely on distance learning. And we have these stories all across the country. I think Mr. Kimmelman points out in his statement that West Virginia has taken some CDBG money and devoted that to our West Virginia Broadband Council to really have a good assessment of what we really have. Because as I've studied this, sometimes I think the reason we're not getting it deployed to where we are is because we're not really sure what we really have, aside from the mapping issue, where the resources are, who the people are that are interested in really deploying this. So I want to go to Ms. Bloomfield first because I don't want to rehash a lot of the questions, but one of the things that you said in your opening statement and something I'm concerned about deeply is we have USDA, we have FCC, we have Commerce, and we have other dollars coming in from other areas, providers and everything. I think the worst thing we can do is waste money here. And I think that's what's happened in a lot of cases. And so those unserved and underserved areas are still unserved and underserved. You have a program, I think you call it the Forever Connected Broadband. Is that aimed at that particular problem?
It's my aspirational desire that we actually get that coordination, because you do have, funding is limited and you've got to use it wisely. And I look at things that USDA is doing, and how do we coordinate that, through RUS with what the FCC is doing? The nice thing is I think you're seeing more critical conversations there, but then how do they loop in? If West Virginia has their own initiative, how do they become part of that? How do we make sure, for example, that under RDOF, that if anybody has gotten West Virginia money, that not get them kicked out of eligibility? I think we've got to make sure that we have a coordinated approach. And that is really where I think Congress will take a very key role in making sure that all of these key agencies are talking, sharing information, sharing challenge processes, and coordinating where those dollars go so we can use them best.
Another thing that when I was talking to one of our main providers several years ago, I said, what is it really going to take? And he says, well, Shelley, it's going to take time and money. Yeah. Well, we're talking about money here. Let's talk about timelines. I mean, when we see I think this COVID, one of the lessons learned is this connectivity issue. It's just been incredible, the telehealth expansions and the way people like it. They like to have the telehealth appointments, and it provides much more accessibility. Where do each of you think, timeline-wise, we're going to cease having these conversations and have conversations about maybe overexposure to internet or things overbuild? Mr. Berry, do you have a 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, 6 months?
Yeah, thank you. The issue is predictable availability of assured funding. And I think you do that. I mean, we could spend $1 trillion probably building out broadband in the United States, but you can't do that all in 1 year. You have to have the equipment. Put fiber in the ground, it takes time. It takes permitting. If we had a $50 billion USF program after you do a contribution reform, and you knew that was going to come through every year, and you had maps that were accurate, and you had terrain factors, like in West Virginia, it's a beautiful state. I mean, I was over in Davis, West Virginia a couple years ago, and the mayor carried 3 phones because he didn't have coverage. Right. So it's a great place to live, work, and enjoy the mountains, but it's a very expensive place to build. Right. But I think if you had that, then the West Virginia could, in fact, get access to the funds that it so desperately needs for broadband, and so can the rest of the United States. And we really have to get serious about
Yeah, I would.
Reforming the USF contribution factor and giving some real dollars, long-term, predictable dollars to that fund.
So then, Mr. Spelter, 5 years?
Well, I think that the only way to actually sufficiently and accurately answer that question is to understand that it is fundamentally a policy question. Our broadband providers are ready to go to work to not only deploy more broadband, but get more customers and close that digital divide of the last 1 or 2%. Timing is a question of what the political will to actually put the resources that will be required to have a permanent fixed universal service. And it also equally will be accelerated if we're ready to have the political will to fire up that weed whacker and make sure that we can streamline permitting, make sure that federal lands permitting is available, and level the playing field when it comes to things like pole attachment rates,
Right.
where co-ops and electric co-ops and municipal chargers are triple, quadruple more than the rates of other broadband providers. These are all steps we could
Chairman's
take.
telling me my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spalter.